Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
And joining us today is John Deighan, CEO of the Society for the Protection of the Unborn, otherwise known as SPUC. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Nice to meet you.
Very good. Well, we'll get into the work that you're doing in a moment, but we wanted to speak with you today because this Saturday, 7th of September, is the March for Life in London. And there are details up on the screen now for you to take a look. The march begins at the Emmanuel Centre in London at 1:30 p.m. We'll be walking through Westminster and gathering outside the Houses of Parliament. There will be talks and information stalls. Perhaps, John, you'll be there. We'll talk about that in a moment. From 10 a.m. at the Emmanuel Centre, and there's also a mass at St George's Cathedral, Southwark, at 11 a.m. But do please visit the website, which you'll see here on the screen, for more details about transport and joining other groups, and do attend if you can. Which brings us to my first question, John. Why is it important that people, perhaps you might even say this year of all years, attend this March for Life in London on Saturday?
Yeah, well, the march gives an opportunity for people to see that there are others interested in the pro-life movement, but it's becoming increasingly difficult culturally, and this is an act of public witness to let others know that the massacre of the unborn cannot go on without some people in society rebelling against it. So it's really a mark of that, But it's hopefully it's a launching pad, really. Like when we get people together, a lot of our activists are people who've gone to some sort of event, and that spurs them on to take action. And once they decide what's the sort of action that they can do, there are those who are called to public witness. But typically you will find that there are many other areas you can do, sort of things you guys do, as journalists, as podcasters, there's a whole range of activities. And what we're trying to do just now is think, what can we do culturally? The culture of death has expanded. It's going to continue to expand, and there seems to be nothing that can stop it. Politically, we seem to be voiceless. And what can we do every day? But this march is the one time that gives us an opportunity to say, no, there's a lot of us. It's a small minority that are pulling the strings of a society that seems desperate to commit suicide. And there has to be a reaction, that there has to be the creation again of a new creative minority to try and displace the people who are leading us to disaster. So please come along. SPUC will have a stand with other pro-life groups. There's many pro-life organisations. One of the things I'm keen to do is work with them and grow the pro-life movement. It really needs to be a central thing, especially in the Catholic Church. I mean, typically SPUC is supported by Catholics. It shouldn't just be Catholics. We believe it's firmly built on natural law. Everyone knows that killing the innocent is wrong, but come along on Saturday, find out what you can do, and make being pro-life part of your daily witness.
Yeah, you just spoke there about this loud minority, which we see quite often, don't we, with the trans movement and other things. There's a very vocal but minority group, and in fact, we know there's a silent majority who perhaps are uneasy with some of the things that the pressure groups are pushing for in the culture. What can you tell us about the mood of the people at the moment? Is there a desire to see, for example, I know there's been talks in Parliament about lifting the limit from 24 weeks. Well, there's been both talks about lowering it and raising it. And we are actually at the upper limit across Europe, and 24 weeks is quite late. It's for those calculating, it's around 6 months that you can legally get an abortion in the UK. But what do you think is the mood of the people in the UK at the moment?
The sad reality is that most people do not think about it a great deal. So most people would just think this is a settled argument. We need to have abortion. They always imagine it's some terrible case, some young girl's being raped multiple times, the baby is suffering some terrible illness, it's going to be in agony, and therefore that gives them the sort of pigeonhole to put the abortion issue in. And really, they don't want to think about it. So what we're trying to do is think, can we do something that makes people think again? I think generally when you do chat to people, our experience is that when you chat to them, people feel uneasy when you show them the development. There's a desperate attempt to make sure no one knows anything about it. Whenever we get into schools, suddenly you'll find there's news articles saying SPUC are spreading dangerous disinformation is typically what they would say. So we're spreading this dangerous disinformation about the development of the baby in the womb. So they will do anything to stop people thinking. And I had a chat last week with CPR UK, a really good pro-life organisation as well. They go into the streets and they put the big images up and they force the conversation on people, and they've got really good response from that. We do similar things. We do it with youth. We have a youth outreach called Project Truth, and they go and they set up their stalls and they talk about the first 10 weeks because most abortions are taking place before 10 weeks. But when you see the development, wee tiny fingers with nails on them, and people are astounded. And they just think, oh no, that's not right, So, but when I was chatting with the CBR UK Christian Hacking, a really really good guy. But when I was chatting to Christian, I was saying the trouble with our efforts to teach the truth is the system just now that we're living in. It's sort of like antibodies. They see us coming and they circle around us and they make sure that no one hears it. No one hears or sees what you're actually trying to disseminate. And what they will do is come and crush and say, this is despicable, this is disgusting, you shouldn't see, these people need to be put in jail because of the stuff they're trying to show you. So the people don't actually get to see it, but they just hear, and it all adds to the emotivism. Yeah. So we're living in this era, as you very well know, we're living in an era where people don't want to reason. We have the capacity now to manipulate people's emotions, at every level, every soap opera, every movie, in the materials they're getting in schools, even. So they can manipulate emotions and they can move people pretty much where they want to. And, so that's what we're up against. So how do we work in a society where people just are guided by their emotions? And it seems to radicalize a certain number of people. So this brainwashing works. And one of the lessons for me over the last, I've been involved in sort of pro-life movement for about 30 years, but I worked a lot. I spent about 15 years working, trying to stop the advance of the sort of homosexual movement as it swept through Scotland. I worked for the Catholic bishops at the time. But what was very interesting was watching how they did it. Very, very interesting at how they know. They know that in an interaction, especially if you're being interviewed or being presented in front of an audience, people are very quickly adding sort of green flags to you or red flags. And our enemies are brilliant at just covering us with red flags. They frame the whole issue and we just walk out. You just have to pop your head up and they know you're bad. The news know you're a bad guy. And it's like, oh, here's from Catherine Bennett or Mark Lamb. Here they are. And you go, oh, yeah, they're hate figures. Yeah, we hate them. But here's a nice, some transgender activist covered in green flags, really loving, really sympathetic, really kind. So that's the sort of society we're living in. So what do you do when you're trying to get a message to people and you're trying to use reason to convert them, but they didn't arrive at where they are through reason. Yeah. And we just we do not have the power of the mass media today that seems to be centralized with such a coherent and overwhelming message at every turn. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic at what I use them in a chat to my staff to say, the enemy are brilliant at occupying every inch of public space. There's no stone they leave unturned. They know how to do it. Yeah. And so that makes life extremely difficult for us. So it's how do we learn from their techniques and how do we grow a new creative minority that can basically grapple for the levers of power in our society? That's what we're up against. And if we don't do it, if we don't succeed, this society has chosen to end. They've chosen not to have children. We're preparing now to kill off the elderly. We will not be able to fund the health service in the future. We will not be able to fund pensions. So this society has chosen to die. And someone needs to set off the alarm bells just now before it's too late. And that's part of what SPUC and the other pro-life groups, and you and your own sort of particular mission are doing, and trying to revive the values of the faith, because ultimately that's what's needed. We need natural law to be accepted against, but the forum, typically the people who've typically done that have been inside the Catholic Church. But now our enemies have been so powerful, they've managed to silence us, and people are confused. They do not know what to do, and this is a time for us to pull together. And the March for Life is a great example that there are lots of us, but we do need some leadership, and we do need to find a way. How do we do this together, and how do we win?
Well, you're quite right. That, for example, you spoke about this idea that we need to have abortion because women are raped, and it's always these
extreme
what
cases.
you call it, the extreme cases that they go to. But in fact, we know that by far the majority of abortions that take place are for reasons of convenience. By far, well over 95%. And as Catholics, abortion is wrong. Even in circumstances of rape, we believe that, and we go back to natural law. And as you say, we're speaking as Catholics, but we can reason to this position. But one thing that you've spoken about there, which I think Mark and I would say we recognised really powerfully, especially this year, is the suppression of truth, the suppression of reason, the fear of even letting people make their own minds up by presenting them with what is true. We spoke about Lord Moylan's private members bill, didn't we, Mark, earlier this year, where he had put this private members bill through the House of Lords, asking to set up a fetal sentience committee. And it was just with the intention of saying, hey, you know what, let's have a committee. We've done it for octopus and shellfish, to say, why don't we look at whether fetuses in the womb feel pain? That was it. There was no judgment made on whether or not abortion was good or bad. It was simply saying, let's look at the evidence. And the irrationality and unpleasant hostility that we saw coming against him and attacks, it really revealed exactly what you're saying, didn't it, Mark? This kind of fear of the truth getting out. Because you say, what can we do against this huge lobby? What we've got is like David and Goliath. We've got truth on our side. That's the thing. That is a human being in the womb. When else is it going to begin? What do you think? I'm not going to get to 90 if someone kills me before then. I'm not going to get to 50 if someone kills me before then. But at every point from conception, there is a growing human life. It's that simple. And that simple truth is being suppressed. Mark, we were surprised, weren't we, by that bill?
Well, and what fascinates me about this discussion even, and what John has just set up there for us, is that we are losing this argument monumentally. My youngest daughter has just gone through her first year in secondary school, and she's like one of a very small minority of young girls who, is even prepared to have a discussion about it. And this, despite the fact I watched an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience recently, where he was outlining the position on abortion, where he was saying everyone knows that abortion is wrong. That if you actually have the discussion, everyone, but it's got to the point now where it's so polarized that everyone on the left says you can't interfere with bodily autonomy, and everyone on the right says, you can't have any kind of abortion, any kind of whatever they call women's healthcare or whatever, that it's beyond even a discussion. And it's just become this sort of fighting ground. But as you say, John, we're like, it just seems crazy to me. I remember taking my son Michael to a SPUC youth conference, and it was really powerful experience for him. And it was my formative experience when I was a kid, was getting involved with SPUC, and hearing all the arguments put forward properly. And then you go, once you've heard the arguments, once you've heard the facts, it's very difficult to reason to a position where you think that, especially late-term termination is anything even vaguely reasonable. So as a society, how have we got here, John, would you say?
Societies, human beings typically just want to go on with their own life. That's the thing. And the way we've got here I mean, in Spe Salvi, I think it's the second chapter of Spe Salvi, Pope Benedict sort of outlines how we've got here over 500 years. As we started to have relativism within the church, then we had it in philosophy, and then we had the French Revolution, then we had the Russian. He steps through that. So the problem for us is we are against the tide. The tide. Effectively, Christendom has had its time, and Christianity had the power to unite people around a set of values that allowed them to flourish. And you're probably aware of Arnold Toynbee's work, but Toynbee says, pretty much a civilization has 1,000 years, and there's a set of values that impel us to live our best lives. But when we prosper, and we start to take it for granted, and then by the end of it, we start to think, what are those daft, stupid rules that those guys are talking about? We hate those rules. And you have this sort of, you turn into yourself and you actually destroy yourself. So we are part of that.
We're in that phase.
So I think there are circles, there are cycles within that. There's a really interesting book by Robert Bork called Slouching Towards Gomorrah. And he talks about, the time in 1968, so this 1968 sort of university riots, and everyone thought, what has happened? And you had this rebellion of the young against the values of their own society. And then 1969, everyone thought, oh, well, thank goodness that's over. But Bork argues that, well, it wasn't over. Those guys just didn't win. They thought, we can't change the world, but they all went into the right professions. And he argues that it was when Clinton was elected that effectively they were all in positions of seniority. So they were all in trade unions and politics and Hollywood, editors of newspapers, right through the political. And then they were able to just roll out the agenda. But they captured the universities. So the universities, I was once invited by accident to this private briefing. I better not say the name of who was giving this private briefing, but more or less, they were talking about how they had used opinion polls to shape policy. So what they would do is they cleverly create these opinion polls that really, I thought when you read them, you think, oh, they're all leading questions, but then you use these leading questions and then you say, oh, this is what everyone wants, and you sort of move policy in that direction, so you can gradually move people from things that are absolutely unthinkable, and then you think, oh, well, okay, there's a few radical people think that, and then you think, well, I suppose that sounds quite acceptable. But anyway, this particular briefing, this leading proponent of it, really influential person, was saying the secret of our success, and he was saying about how we've transformed people's views, especially this one was particularly on homosexuality, we've transformed their views, and the way we did it was through the universities. He said the universities is the key to how we do it. And the question he ended his presentation on was, what he said, the only question is, can we keep it this way? And I was sitting thinking, well, no, you can't, because you've got to keep lying forever. Whereas the truth is always there. The truth will come out, and you guys have got to exhaust yourself generation after generation telling people lies. And, but they're willing to do it. They're willing to expend all the resources of our society and pretend to people that we're making choices that have a good outcome. But the outcome we will see in the next, in this generation coming, we will see the collapse of our institutions, and we're living through it now. We're living through the fight for what will the values of the civilization that succeeds Christendom. So Europe is the flourishing of Christendom, but it's over, and now you've got these people fighting for. These are the set of values that the new civilization will arise on. And I think that's the role for us. How can we bring together enough people in our society to think, no, actually, those are the values that allow human flourishing? And we know what those values are. But most of our fellow citizens don't. And we've got a small number of radical activists. And we've got the rest of people who are thinking, well, life is, pretty meaningless. I can have try and get through as many series on Netflix as I can, or have as many pizzas delivered as I can.
Just a utilitarian mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sounds like the Cardinal George thing, doesn't it? That my successor will die in prison, and then his
Yes.
successor will rebuild society from the ground up, which is what the Catholic Church has done for generations. Do you think we've got to that point now where we're looking at the collapse and, all right, we're going to try and hold the battlements, but ultimately we're going to have to pick up the bits and rebuild society at the end of once they've burnt themselves out?
Well, actually, usually when I speak to people who say, "Oh, you're really depressing," but to be honest, I feel I'm sort of quite optimistic because I think I'm genuinely realistic. So you're not, disappointment's a function of expectation, so you've got to think, what are our realistic expectations? But my thing is, like, it doesn't take a lot of people to win. It really doesn't, if they're doing the right things. And we've got a lot of people, and we just need to switch them on and form them and turn them into leaders. So if we can have people in the culture shaping areas of society, I don't want to go to jail. I want to be sitting here in 10 years' time going, oh yeah, John Paul II was right about this new springtime. I know, but when I used to read that stuff, I used to think, well, I sort of see a desolate winter coming. But it would be nice to think, well, maybe we can usher in the new springtime now. People have to. I think when my kids are sort of, the youngest one now is just hit 20, so I sort of like to listen to what they're saying about their culture. A lot of young people are fed up with all the woke stuff. They're all into personal development. They're all wanting to go to the gym. They all want to make themselves better people.
Yeah.
And I think, one of my daughters was saying she wants to write a book, and it's like, now I'm developed, now what? And it's like, sort of, they're all into personal development, but for what?
For what end?
For what end? And they say, surely it must be to make a better society. How can all us young people, we want to lead better lives. We're all listening to Steve Bartlett and how to be efficient and effective. We're all going to the gym, but for what? And we can, I think as Catholics, but I'm trying to do it in the pro-life movement, we can show them, here's what, a world where every life is valued, where people are given the opportunity to flourish, and we respect people. We allow them to have debate, and if we have debate, then the best arguments can win, and we will build the best society together.
Yeah, and really get into what that looks like, because if we just say we've got to respect people and we've got to, people will say, well, you've got to respect women then and give them abortions, and you think, well, then you have to get into, well, we're not talking about one person here, we're talking about two. So that's where the truth is suppressed, which we've spoken about. And it's not hopeless, because you've spoken about some movements, and we have to say to young people, as you've just said here, this has been intentional. There has been an intentional attempt to go in to education, to go into the universities, and to create this culture where people talk about reproductive rights as if it's a given. We don't really think about natural rights anymore. They talk about abortion as healthcare. And like you say, once that's so steeped in the culture, people don't really question it. So this should be a clarion call to young people who are going out into professions. And I know actually of a lot of good programs where this formation is happening. And I think it's growing as the enemy overplays their hand, and people are getting fed up of the incoherence of this movement and this culture of death. And they see where it leads, and falling birth rates and civilizational crashes and unhappiness and depression and suicide. I think the hope is that will and is turning young people to say, as you've just said, we need something better. And what we have to do is then say, well, why do we need something better, and how can you help to bring that about? But it is a hopeful message ultimately.
Well,
I think we are the people of hope. Yeah.
I think on Catholic Unscripted, one of the things we try to do is look at the good, the true, and the beautiful, like the transcendentals, and always to sort of focus on building the culture, that how the Catholic faith builds the culture. So, like, in the context of what Catherine's just said there, what does that look like, do you think? What does the pro-life generation look like? Why is it important, John, that we're pro-life, and how does it change society? Small question.
It's quite well. It's a simple answer. And it is looking at the building blocks of society once again, and realising there's a massive. I mean, Catherine, you mentioned there about the depression. The number of people who are living with depression is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, one of the projects we're looking at just now is is relating that to the extent of abortion. So many women and families are impacted by abortion, and they're carrying it about. And one of the things we are doing is we're not actually talking about that. And those women are told, listen, you had a brilliant opportunity. You had an abortion. He let you go on with your life. Shut up about it. Don't come back complaining. And the reality is they're walking about with this terrible, terrible hurt. And it's only the pro-life movement is offering them a path to healing. So I think we can give healing to those who are hurt. And that fits in with all the field hospital sort of stuff, if folk want that. But we need to show people the environment in which people flourish. And I mean, my wife's a teacher, and you guys are communicating with the young, you see what they're like. A lot of them are very sad because of what's happened in their home and in their families. And if we show them the model, we've got the model of a family where a mother and father love each other and they're open to life and they love their children. That's the building blocks. Yeah. And then as we grow on at a family level, you learn the virtues in a family, you nurture virtues, and then you have virtues, people capable of being virtuous citizens. And then you create a civil society which has a capacity to help others to live better lives. And then out of a healthy civil society, you can create a healthy political society. Now, the problem we've had just now is we've had a collapsing of civil society because you have this really powerful political society that has its tentacles in everything. So in the trade unions and the universities and the schools, the tentacles are everywhere. So you do not have a healthy, independent civil society that holds political society to account. Because the reason a political society comes around is to ensure the common good of the whole. And now when you have the dominant minority, they are using the position of power to ensure that their values are enforced on the rest of society. And that's the struggle we're facing just now. How do we say to that dominant minority, you've had your day, you're taking us to disaster. We want a society where we're free, where we can have discussions, where families are supported. I mean, one of the things we're looking at just now is saying, why have we got this cap on benefits, tax benefit for families with 2 children? After 2 children, basically the benefit is removed. But you think, at a time when they must know, someone in government must know, and they're refusing to look, they must know that if you do not have more children, you're not having more taxpayers for the future. They must know that.
Yeah.
Yet they will do it. And they will invest to make sure. And they will invest. The first thing you do, if you chat to anyone who's just had a baby recently, the first thing they do when they come to talk to the mother after it is, how can we make sure you never have another child? What contraception are you on? That's the first thing they do. It's as if, and that's people who've dedicated their lives to being a midwife. So we've got this really perverse understanding of the value of a family. So we need to re-educate people on that and show them that's one of the pathways to fixing things. But it sounds like, that's old fuddy-duddy traditional values, and they can frame that, cover it with red flags, and say don't go there and don't think about it.
Yeah, but that's nonsense. Don't listen to that nonsense. This isn't old fuddy-duddy traditional values. And if it is traditional values, it's traditional values that lead to happiness, flourishing, fulfillment. And you say, Mark, why be pro-life? Why wouldn't you be pro-life? Like, of all things you might be, being pro-human life is a pretty good thing, because what does it look like if you're not? It looks like getting rid of the infirm, the elderly, the disabled. It looks like an ageing population with no young people to look after the elderly. It looks like a massive pension bill and no income for young workers. No children when you get older and you realise you're not going to be 25 forever and you're surrounded by precisely nobody. And all the ingredients are there in our culture to keep you distracted from this truth, to keep you distracted. You will be on your phone, you'll be checking social media, you'll get an instant delivery of something you want, you can binge watch programmes. And what we're not doing is developing young people to have self-discipline, to have self-control, and abortion, of course, is part of that. You want to have sex, you want to have casual sex without consequences, your contraception fails, use abortion as a afterthought contraception, get rid of the baby. There's no consequences to anything. And this is a culture that ultimately you feel like saying, well, you think you're not pro-life? just wait and see how the vision that you have as somebody who is pro-abortion and pro-euthanasia and pro all these things now that lead to death and sterility, and see what that looks like. Because trust me, it is not the life that you will flourish in. It's not a happy life, but you are being so distracted that you are being led to accept it without question. So I would say smarten up, stop and ask some questions and think, actually, why is it important that we consider life from conception to natural death? Why is it important that we develop self-control and discipline? And as a woman, I think abortion is often framed as an important female right, an important reproductive right, and women should be pro-abortion and support the pro-choice movement. Well, that is absolutely wrong. And if people can't see that, in fact, it makes it so easy to dispose of a woman. Here, we'll take a woman, instead of cherishing her, instead of recognizing her dignity, we'll fill her with chemicals to sterilize her. If they fail, we'll just ship her in and do an operation on her and take the baby. And to think that this is pro women. Do you remember, Mark, when we were in Chicago and we had a conversation with our lovely friend Dan, who said when he was a young man, he's in his 70s now, I think, Humano Vitae came out, and he, which is the church's document, which was surprised everybody and actually spoke about this idea of the end point of a culture that accepts contraception as one of the themes in the document. And he sat at the table and said, I agree with this document, which was an unpopular stance at the time. And his girlfriend at the time came up to him afterwards and gave him a big hug. She is now his wife of 9 children, and they've got about 20 grandchildren. And she said, when you said that, I recognised that you respect, value and love me as a woman, that you are not prepared to use me and discard me. So I want to say, as a woman, abortions, that pro-choice is not, doesn't favour women. In fact, it leads to abuse of women. And that's another truth that I think we need to get out to young people.
Do you think there's a possibility of a backlash of the women who arrive at the stage who think it's too late, I've been conned? You know, I've got to the stage, exactly as you said earlier, Catherine, you think, well, actually, I'm not 25 anymore, I'm 40, and I'm starting to feel a bit lonely, and and unfulfilled, and yeah, my career's as far as it's going. You know, surely there has to be a voice there. I mean, I've often thought, you know, there are the women who've had abortions and they do everything to suppress their voice, but there must be also the women, just because of the sad end. You know, the movies can always make a fake happy ending, but when there's so many people who've come through it in the last generation and thought, actually, do you know what, it's not a happy ending, please, can you speak up?
Yeah, I think that's increasingly happening, don't you, Mark? I've noticed it more, that there are women saying, actually, we've been sold a lie and we're continuing to sell this lie to young women. And you're told you can have everything, and being dragged down by children will prevent you from having this perfect life that you want. And I think women are realizing that is a lie, and they are getting older. And the problem is they're then thinking about children in their late 30s and early 40s and finding that it isn't as easy as they thought it would be, and are finding that very difficult. And there's started to be a bit of a trend on social media, on TikTok and things like that, of women in their 40s going, hey, check me out, I'm 40 and I've got no kids and I'm drinking wine and I'm so happy. And I mean, anyone looking at that
Their
can
eyes
see
are soulless
so
black
poor.
pits.
Yeah, it's like, why are you doing this on social media? Because
who are you
in a way
trying to convince?
you're trying to convince yourself. Yeah. So I definitely think that there is a movement now where women are seeing but the problem is, it's like anything. It's like political, you know, people in politics who make bad policy decisions, and when they do, the implications are so huge that if they were to backtrack, they're sort of tied into the lies and the bad decisions. Because if they backtrack, that's their whole career is in ruins, and they can't do that. So they take it further and they compound it. We've said this in schools, where you have we need sex education to lower pregnancy rates and stop STIs. And then what happens? STIs rocket. And you say, oh, instead of backtracking and say, maybe that wasn't the right decision, we'll double down on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of those videos of women saying, look at me, I'm 40 and drinking wine. It's like, we can't say, hang on, this has been a lie and we are harmed by it. So we have to double down and say, this is brilliant. But it is a lie and people can see it, I think. People always see truth.
It cracks me up. Do you know Ruth Rawlins, who's always at the March for Life?
Does
a
yes,
lot
yes.
of video work,
Yeah.
So last year, she was going up to there's always some pro-abortion people there who are campaigning, and she was going up to them and trying to have a conversation with them. And I'll never forget, there was this lady, from behind shouted, like someone was sort of speaking to her on the microphone, and this woman come up behind her and went, "Don't talk to her, she'll convince you you're wrong." It's like exactly what you've been saying.
Terrible,
Whatever you do, don't find out the truth, because you won't support this anymore. And that's, for me, I mean, as we're having this conversation, and you've mentioned several times, John, that it's a crisis of leadership, and that seems to be an ongoing theme in a lot of our discussions.
You can maybe see behind us, it's one of our values,
core values.
It's what we're trying to live up to.
I can't help but feel, that this argument is such an obvious and clear argument, but we're losing it. We're losing ground in the culture war purely because we've failed to engage, and we've failed to have that conversation. And maybe that's because our bishops feel that, it's unkind or they're not qualified. I just don't understand. But it's one of the great things about the march on Saturdays. We've got 5 Catholic bishops actually coming, which is the most, I think I'm right in saying, we've ever had, isn't it? I mean, fortunately, we got Bishop John Keenan comes every year. God love him, doesn't he? He's an absolute hero and a really lovely guy from Scotland. But we've got some new faces there, which are really welcome. So it's great to see some leadership from them, finally.
Yeah, well, really, I mean, I sort of got quite an insight for what it's like for bishops, working. 16 years I worked for the Bishops' Conference of Scotland. And even in taking on my role as leadership in SPUC, and you start to realise, especially when you're working in a spiritually sensitive area, the pressures on them are enormous. I would say they are enormous, and it's very confusing. And you've got people you think are really amazing people, and they're telling you things that just maybe don't sound quite right. It's a really difficult place to be in, And one thing I would say about, especially when the things are happening politically, it's quite lonely for a bishop, because some of them would also think, look, my area is theology and sacraments, and politics and all the machinations of that are pretty complicated. I think we do need more lay people stepping up and more lay people giving leadership. And there has, when I worked for the Bishops' Conference, I would have fairly senior people, influential in their field, but they would phone up saying, what do the bishops want me to do? And I was sort of thinking, no, that's sort of the wrong way around. You're the expert in that area. Come to the bishop and say, this is what I'm doing to help you work with the Catholic faithful. So in the world, the lay people need to give leadership as well, and you'll get more bishops. The number of bishops endorsing the work of SPUC is much greater than you would think publicly. One of the targets, this was one of the things I first did. I thought I need to benchmark how effectively we are working with every diocese in the UK. And so I basically gave them all a score. And that score's got 2 sides to it. Either we weren't doing enough or they weren't doing enough. But one of them was, what's our relationship like with the bishop? And so we chose that as a task. So we've got that. I've got maybe shouldn't give it on air, but I've got all the stats on that. But it's much higher than you would expect. And in their job, they're maybe given a particular remit, and they think, I need to stick to this remit, and that remit's someone else. I better not step on his toes. And there's all those complications going on. And even, so I've got a small organisation I'm in charge of. They are genuine spiritual attacks you get. Genuine. You feel so. If I'm getting that just running a pro-life organisation, imagine the authority you have as a bishop. The devil must send a legion of demons to just torment them. So the life can be a challenge as well. And I just think all I can control is me. and what I can do. And if folk aren't standing up to the leadership, well, I could maybe go and say and try and give them encouragement, say, what can I do to help you if you need that, if it would help. But what can we do? Just give the leadership. And it must have been in the early 2000s. I got interviewed by EWTN, and they came over from the States, and they were saying to me they'd been trying to get someone to speak to them from the pro-life movement, and they were shocked that they just couldn't find anyone in the pro-life movement. And they just said, in the States, the pro-life movement is everywhere. They're absolutely everything. And that's because lay people stood up and they led it. And then the priests and the bishops all thought, yeah, well, this is great, and got on board. And I think we have to try and get that tipping point. That's what we've been looking at, I suppose. How do we get the tipping point to make the pro-life the eminent issue that should be? When we're killing over 250,000 human beings in our country, and it's not the eminent issue, there's something far wrong there. Someone somewhere doesn't understand what's going on, and we need to correct that. We need to give the leadership to turn it around.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you so much, John. Just to finish with a final question, because we're up on 40 minutes and have taken a lot of your time, although I hope you'll come back and speak with us, because there's so much more we'd love to speak with you about. But you talk, abortion is very clear cut. We know it's an operation to remove the baby from the mother's womb. One of the things that I think surprised even some Catholics, and continues to surprise some Catholics, is IVF. So just last week, Trump, who a lot of people felt was a great pro-life hope, but of course his commitment to pro-life issues has been shown not to be so recently, and he's talked about free IVF as part of his campaign, which has upset a lot of otherwise Trump supporters. And some Catholics commented and said, well, I don't understand why people are upset. What's wrong with being pro-life? It gives people a family, and it's lovely, and it's what God wants. Yeah. Because abortion is far clearer. Just to finish, I wonder, in the time we've got, are you able to just speak a little bit, while we're marching for life, to speak about why IVF is also problematic from this perspective of protecting life from conception?
Well, this, personally, I accept humani vitae, and so we shouldn't be interfering. We cannot make ourselves the master of, a human being and the creator of a human being. And as soon as you do that, you change the relationship we have with another person. And we start to implement all the quality control things that we've seen, so we start to become eugenic, and we don't value every human being. So there's that. But the process itself leads to the creation and then the killing of countless. We've now got millions of tiny human beings frozen. And I remember once being invited along to one of these labs where they were experimenting on embryos, and I ended up, they were trying to get this funder to invest lots of money in it, and he said, John, will you come along with me, because I don't really know the ethics of this. And I ended up in a chat with them, and they all ultimately know they're killing a human being, and that's the uncomfortable truth. They all knew it, but what they have to do is put the emotional, look at all the benefits. So they were talking about, we're going to be able to cure cancer, cure tumours of all sorts of kinds, so they give all that, and then we'll give people, a baby if they want one. We'll soon be able to have catalogues, and you can choose what your baby looks like, and you can get that embryo. So it's a brave new world. But what I would say is, I've never heard anyone talk about it. I've never heard anyone say that is wrong. So there's no formation there. No one hears that's wrong. I've had people say to me quite a thing, oh, I'm really excited, my daughter's going for IVF. And you think, I've heard that from Catholics. You think, do you not know that's an awkward conversation to have with someone, to try and explain to them, because it just sounds so harsh. So I think there's a level of formation. But the other thing is, I think there needs to be a level of CPD. You get CPD in every profession. I think there needs to be a level of CPD. Over the summer, I decided to read Veritatis Splendor again, and one of the points in that is about the rights of the lay faithful to hear the truth and the doctrine in its fullness, but also to be protected against movements that are undermining their faith. And I think if we took that seriously and we gave CPD, and we said, the priests, we need in your programme of formation in your parishes be addressing these.
Can you just tell our viewers, break down CPD and what you mean by that?
Oh, sorry, continuing professional development.
Yeah.
Yes, so all of us need it. You know, there are things that change and new arguments that come forward or new challenges, and you need to address that. So if you're a priest trying to deal with that, and you're trying to run the parish and all the rest of it, and then you think, oh, I heard somebody say their daughter's getting IVF and she's all excited. Oh, I maybe haven't addressed that from the pulpit. You know, so these are the sorts of things, but that needs to be in somebody's strategic plan somewhere. Thinking, are we abiding by what Veritatis Splendor said? Are we making sure that we're looking at those things that threaten the flock, and are we addressing them? And I think just they need a reminder of that. Now we can raise that. It's a huge threat. But the IVF has been happening for so long. People have just become used to it.
Yeah. Well, we are very thankful to you for the work that you're doing with SPUC and elsewhere. John, thank you so much for it. It's very, very important work. And as you've made clear, a lot of the work is about trying to help people see these issues, to talk about them, to look at the reality of them, and not to obfuscate, which is part of the plan of the lobby that is against what you're trying to do. So to be open to that. And if people can see what they're dealing with, they will be able to reason and be able to see why these things are problematic, and look at how we make judgments. And as Catholics, to look at how we make judgments as well.
The other thing on top of that, I think we need to learn in the Catholic Church and things is the role of emotion and how to communicate and touch the emotion. Because if we're just relying on passing on the doctrine, you know, getting people to reason, the trouble is they don't want to reason. And typically they'll say, do I really need to believe that? Oh, well, that's okay, then I'll forget it. So you're working against their emotions all the time.
Brilliant. Well, John, we'd like to talk with you another time about euthanasia, which is another big one, not one to start at almost 50 minutes into this conversation. And I know we wanted to focus today with March for Life on Saturday, especially on the protection of the unborn. But if you'll come back and talk with us, because there are some sinister moves to try and bring about legalise in the UK, increasingly pressure to legalise assisted suicide. So we'd like to talk with you about that. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, John.
Oh, thank you. And, a pleasure. Thank you for your work, both of you.
We'll see you on Saturday, won't we?
We'll see you on Saturday.
Sadly, I feel bad. I will not be able to make it. We're sending a whole team of staff down there. I can't make it. I'm actually going to another one this year, not this Saturday, but I'm going to speak at the Cologne March for Life, and we've got staff at the Slovakian March for Life as well, and then we've got the Washington March for Life in January. So we have got a few, and this year I wasn't able to make it. But usually I go on that bus with Bishop John Keenan. I'm from Paisley Diocese, so I'm usually on that bus with Bishop John. So it will be a great day. We've got a lot of SPUC staff there, and all the other organisations working together on it.
Well, and it's worth saying, isn't it, if you haven't been before? I mean, I'd really encourage anyone to come, and especially if you've got children, because it's a really great atmosphere. It's really led by the youth. There's lots of great activities, lots of great talks, and it's not just for Catholics. There's lots of different Christians. So please do come along and support it, and make the pro-life voice heard.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Stand together. We'll support each other. And as Mark said, I know lots of families with lots of kids who are going, all their children are coming. And it is a really important thing to do at this time to make our voices heard. So John, you're doing a lot of marching. Well done. Just not as it happens in London this Saturday. But me and Mark will be there. Gavin can't be there, unfortunately. But we hope to see some of you there. Come up and make yourselves known to us. Say hello. And we'll meet you at the march. So details again, please visit the website, which you'll see here, and see you then. But for now, thank you for watching. I'm Catherine Bennett.
And I'm Mark Lambert.